All right, today we're going to be talking about how I used Joe Dispenza's teaching, metaphysics, and mindset to make over $1.7 million online. Now, the biggest thing I want you to take away from this video is just overall what it actually takes to manifest more wealth and abundance into your life. Because I'm sure you consume a lot of content about Joe Dispenza, metaphysics, changing your frequency, changing your identity, but I want to get into the real world applicable things that you can actually do to see more money show up into your life. Before I can do that, I want to do a quick recap of what we talked about in the first Dispenza video. And if you haven't seen that, go check it out because it's going to be a real in-depth breakdown about the 3 things you need to overcome in order to actually step into a new identity of manifestation. Now, the biggest thing we talked about was the mirror principle, right? We talked about how the fact that mind and matter are actually one. Now, why is this so important to understand? Because this tells us that the immaterial world, our mind, is actually the thing that impacts the matter, impacts the physical world, right? So we have a causal plane and we have an effect plane. Now right here, this is going to be the one thing, the real mistake that everyone makes. Everyone is always trying to change something about the effect, right? The girl they date, the money they make, the job they have. That is the physical world. What did we talk about? The physical world is only 0.0001% of the experience. Because on the basis subatomic level of the universe, everything comes down to the electron cloud, and that is 99.9% energy. This is what we talked about in that video, so go check it out. But we need to stay on the causal plane because this is where all the shift is going to happen, right? But before we get into that, I want to actually go back to the most important point that clicked for a lot of you guys in that video. So when we were talking about meditation and we were talking about subconscious program, we were talking about how the fact that meditation is so important in order to create this gap right here. We want to create the gap between an impulse and an action, because if you do not do that, you are going to experience a reaction. This is why it's a subconscious program, right? If you have to spend money and you're struggling to experience more wealth, experience more abundance, and let's say you have a familiar experience, right? You don't have enough money to pay for X, Y, and Z. If that impulse comes up and you allow yourself to fall into that rabbit hole, you're just going to have a reaction. You're going to have a similar experience with that. Versus the biggest thing we touched on was that if you can just slow down and come into the present moment and just truly realize that it's just an impulse. It's literally just a chemical in your brain, in your body, signaling to you an energetic and emotional response, right? And that might be something that you've attached the identity of lack and scarcity to. Now, this is one of the biggest things that I do when I help the entrepreneurs and creators I work with, because you guys don't know a lot about me, but I work with some of the biggest internet creators and the biggest entrepreneurs. And the biggest thing I help them do is just reframe, shift, shatter limiting beliefs, and step into an identity that can welcome abundance. My biggest client, Megan, in a year, she made over $1.3 million. And all we had to do was change the identity she held with money and the identity she held with herself. But we are going to get into that. Let's circle back to the most important thing. Now let's kind of dive into this a little deeper. We were talking about the causal plane and we were talking about the effect plane, right? If we do not come off of the biological response of fight or flight, then we are going to stay on this infinite loop of program and we are not going to be able to exercise our right as a conscious creator who shifts their identity to someone that welcomes wealth, that welcomes money, that welcomes success, right? Your mind only wants to accept things that protect it. That's a fight or flight mechanism. That's a survival mechanism. So if the idea of you experiencing a lot more success, right? If you're an entrepreneur that's doing well for yourself, but you really want to step into that next level, or you're someone that wants to leave your job and step into entrepreneurship, that can be scary because you're going to be stepping in to the unknown. The secret is actually going to be a spiritual practice. Business, entrepreneurship, wealth is actually a spiritual concept, and I want to break that down for you more coming up. But let's get back to cause and effect, because this is going to make a lot of sense. Now, Joe Dispenza talks about overcoming our mind, our body, and our environment, right? Because those are the three things that anchor us to a familiar experience. This is going to be a quick summary, but like I said, go check out my previous video and environment. One of these is time. Let's just go. Time. Right? Time is how quick you want something to happen, your expectation of what it's going to look like. Your body is the literal chemical response of what happens when you get thrown into familiar situations. If you want to make more money, you step into a new identity. And if you step into that new identity and you get scared and experience lack and scarcity and doubt and fear, and you step back into your old identity, then you're not going to be able to actually be the version that steps into the unknown and actually creates that wealth and success in their life. Now, the third thing is the environment, right? You have to become bigger than your environment. You need to have a grander sense of self. Because if you identify with the environment, the self is equal to the environment. So the experiencing you're having in the familiar world is going to be how you identify and how you view yourself on that spectrum. Now, there's something called the map of consciousness. And David R. Hawkins, I recommend you guys all check him out. Even though we're coattailing off of Joe Dispenza for the content, I'm going to throw you guys some alley-oops about some people that I want you to check out because they'll actually change your life. So, the map of consciousness is our frequency of emotion and the energy and awareness that we experience as humans. And the highest frequency you can experience in the universe is pure consciousness, it's the Tao, and it's authenticity. Now, I don't care how successful you are, if you're trying to step into a new identity and you're feeling that resistance, you're feeling that pull, that's because your energy is going back to something familiar, right? Your body's trying to protect itself, so it's going to this state of fight or flight, it's going into this survival mode. And when it goes into this survival mode, it's going to try and stay as you are because it's so used to being comfortable. And what Joe Dispenza says is that if you want a new experience, you have to open your arms and let go, because how could a previous identity and a previous experience ever equate or be as magical as the new experience you want to have? You could not predict the new experience based on what you've experienced because you're trying to actually overcome all the previous experiences and welcome a new one. Now we're going to get into the energetics of this, and the biggest thing I want to focus on is just going to be how we get you into the most authentic, highest frequency in the universe. And this is going to be all based on personal experience. Yes, I've read a lot of books, but I also have a lot of life experience. I built an e-commerce brand, over $500,000. We had 70,000 followers, and it was all in the mental health space. It was called Better Days, and it was all about the slogan was, "It's okay not to be okay." And it was after COVID. And I just was overcome with this spiritual experience as I was creating this brand. And I just felt a calling to serve the world. And now I want you to pay attention to that because it's not logical, right? Why would I invest my life savings, my energy, my time, and just give it to the world without anything in return? Because there's something spiritual to that. And I'm going to show you that throughout the metaphysics, the mindset, and the Joe Dispenza teachings. But we need to talk about how your frequency is what you frequently see, and how it's going to be about changing that frequency in order to step into a new version of you, right? So let's say we got a little guy right here, and we got a little guy right here. And over here, we have the world that everyone experiences. Africa, Europe, Antarctica, North America. Now you have to understand is that the world and the reality you experience is based on the frequency you hold internally. It's all about who you become. It's a state of being that attracts all these things into your life. And this is why, with all my clients and in my own life, you have to put your spirituality, you have to put your mindset, you have to put conscious congruency first, right? You have to live in alignment. Because if you're not living in alignment, the only person you cannot lie to is yourself, right? Let's say this person right here is an influencer, right? They got hundreds of thousands of followers. They look like they got it all figured out. They're spending money on bottles every weekend. They're flexing their watches, their cars, but deep down inside, they're lonely. Deep down in their side, they're not who they were called to be. They're putting a facade because they think the world wants them to look a certain way. And they're just out of alignment. They're such a low frequency. They're in a state of guilt because they're so shameful of the activities they engage in. They experience anger and fear. That is going to be the perspective they have of the world. And because it's the internal frequency they have, that's going to be the experience they have. Because you get what you give. The only thing you can do in this life is internal work. And that internal work impacts how you show up as a parent, impacts how you show up as an entrepreneur, impacts how you show up as a partner, a friend, and it impacts how you show up for yourself. And this is why I want to iterate the importance of putting faith, putting God, putting spirituality, whatever you believe in first, because it's the thing you sit with every day. And it's how you actually reprogram your subconscious mind into alignment. Now let's talk about person 2. This person saw person 1 and was like, damn, I wish I could be on that yacht. I wish I could have those watches, have those cars, but deep down something's telling me that's not for me. It's like God was whispering in his ear, Grant, it's not about looking cool. It's not about the money. It's not about the success. There's something more to it. And that something more is living in alignment and living in regards to your highest self and your highest calling. And I'm going to show you how your purpose is actually to just be you, to actually just be authentic. Because when you truly understand your concept of self, you understand what you're called here to do. And this is going to be how we experience more material wealth and success and abundance. And now, by no means have I read the Bible as much as I should, but we're going to touch on those two things from the Bible in order to kind of nail this home and talk about how this applies to wealth and success being a spiritual concept. Now, person 2 listened to that calling and was like, I'm going to go be in alignment. I'm going to be my best self. I'm going to sit with my faith. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to overcome those negative thoughts. Any bad thing that happens to me, I'm going to rise above. I'm going to transcend, because all I can do is influence my perspective and how I respond to things. That's all I can do in this life. You can't control what's thrown your way. You can control how you respond to it. And when you control the frame in which you experience things, you can frame that for more wealth and abundance. You understand that the most successful people have had gnarly things happen in their life. Businesses fail, lost millions of dollars. Myron Golden is actually the inspiration for what I'm going to talk about next. He started a 7-figure, multi-million-dollar business, lost it all, and came back even more, and now he makes $10 million a year. And he's a man of Christ, or not even a religious man. He's just a man of God. He's a man of the principles talked about in the Bible. And that's what I want to talk about next, because funny enough, I don't think any of the religions were supposed to be set as law. I think they were supposed to be set as principles on how to awaken our higher selves and live in accordance with our calling. Now, this is the biggest thing I want you to take away. It's all about changing your frequency. And now let's break down frequency. Your frequency is what you frequently see. What you frequently see is not a physical experience, because that's only 0.0001% of the spectrum of energy. The spectrum of energy is actually the spectrum of consciousness, the emotion, the energy in motion, which is the 99.999% energy. So it's actually about keeping yourself in alignment with the reality you want to experience, which is why it comes back to the mirror principle, right? You shift the internal world, and the external world has no choice but to reflect that. So what are some traits of abundance and wealth and success that attract more money into our lives, right? Money is an effect. It's not a cause. And that's the biggest thing. So we're going to talk about those two principles. And please educate me in my storytelling about the biblical principles. But this is all just consuming it through a third party. So the first thing we're going to talk about is King Solomon. And then we're going to talk about why God said, be fruitful and multiply. So King Solomon was someone that sacrificed everything about the material world. He came to God with tens of thousands of sacrifices, right? Now, he didn't actually sacrifice things, but he said, God, take this from me. Take my worries about my wisdom, take my worries about the women, take my worries about the wealth. I'm in pure devotion to you. I'm in pure devotion to the most authentic frequency in the universe. Now, what is God? God is the thing that connects us all. It's the energy that courses through us. It's the 99.99% infinite potential. This is what Dispenza talks about. The electron cloud is pure infinite potential. And this electron cloud, this energy, is conscious. The energy that makes up everything is actually no thing, right? We talked about this in the last video. The wave particle is back and forth with an observer. So energy is only collapsed in reality when there's someone to observe the reality we want to experience. So if you want to experience more wealth, if you want to experience more success of the highest degree, you have to align with the highest frequency. The highest frequency is the Tao, the effortless nature of the universe. Think about it. What is the effortless nature of the universe? The effortless nature of the universe is the love that has enough abundance to make sure that the sun is always shining. It's the love that made sure plants turn carbon dioxide into oxygen for us. It's the love, the energy, the just pure presence that made sure we have this material world to experience, that sacrificed itself to be the backbone of the experience. Don't you see this? The pure energy is actually everywhere all the time. We just can't see it because it's at the backbone of the material experience. That is pure sacrifice. That is why Jesus Christ was put on a cross and crucified. That is why King Solomon sacrificed everything and gave it all up to God. Because it's actually about discarding the things that we don't want to experience. I don't want to experience scarcity. I don't want to experience worry. I don't want to experience fear. I don't want to experience guilt. God, I give that all to you. Now, the science and metaphysics behind that is that we are actually observing what we want to experience. So if you spend your time in devotion to the highest frequency, like King Solomon, in the story, God comes to him one night and says, Solomon, I will give you whatever you wish. Now, what did King Solomon wish for? He wished for wisdom. And this wisdom brought all the riches because he was wise enough to lead the kings, to lead men. And it was all because of his alignment in totality with God, or the Tao, or the highest frequency of authenticity. Now, let's talk about that frequency, because what is the highest frequency? The highest frequency is service, or selflessness. It's selfless. Service is selfless. Think about it. If everything's on a spectrum, right? If hot and cold are just the spectrum of temperature, if our identity is a spectrum of self and no self, the selfless, the connection to the all, the connection to totality, or the wave and the particle are just spectrums of the experience on different sides, the most scarce thing you can do is be worried about yourself and be worried about your problems. You have to expand your concept of self. Expanding our concept of self is what Dispenza talked about. We overcome the familiar environment, the familiar body, the familiar time by expanding our concept of self. And we are actually expanding our concept of self into selflessness, saying, hey, I'm willing to put you before me. I'm willing to serve you because you get what you give. That's the hack. That's the metaphysical hack. If you are living in alignment with that pure Tao, you're going to get that abundance in return because you've bridged the gap. In the first video, we talked about how no thing is actually everything. The 99.99% energy that is no thing is actually the backbone of the 0.00001% that is everything. So if you want everything, you have to be no thing. You have to be selfless enough to give your service to the world. When I started my e-commerce business, it was all about being of service to the world. Then I went $80,000 in debt because I wanted to look cool. I wanted to look like I had it all figured out. The tens of thousands of followers, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh my God, look at me, I'm Grant. No, no, that is not what you want. I lost it all. I lost everything. That was the starting of my spiritual awakening, because that's not what it's about. It's about this right here, this connection. I have nothing to gain by giving you this information except wearing my heart on my sleeves, living my truth, living my authenticity, and telling you what I figured out. The wise dome. It's all about being selfless, and that's where all the wealth is going to come from. Because if you can serve someone of the highest degree, that's what you're going to get paid for. When I went $80,000 in debt, I started to consult content creators because I knew they had a lot of followers, but they weren't making enough money. I came to them and said, hey, I will provide this solution. You don't got to pay me much, but I just want a percentage of the value I can provide to you. I was a partner on a 7-figure plus venture, and I got paid out a percentage of that. But I did it selflessly. I put them before me. I put my service to them before myself, before my worries. On the days I woke up and didn't know if I would have it in me, I gave that to God and said, hey, we're going to figure it out regardless. It was all about my perspective. Now, let's talk about the second thing. We talked about King Solomon sacrificing our worries, sacrificing our fears, sacrificing our identity we don't want to experience. And if you choose to live in alignment with God, He will bestow upon you all the wealth, riches of the kingdom. But the King Solomon fatal tale is, as soon as you start to identify with the effect, you start to identify with the wealth, the women, the clout, which is what I did. You don't have it figured out, because it's actually your devotion to the highest calling, to the highest frequency, to the highest version of yourself. When people talk about your highest self, you are created in the image of God. You are the 99.999% energy that comes from the quantum field of infinite potential. Do you see how that religion and Joe Dispenza talk about the same thing? And that if you live with an open heart and an open mind, you can start to connect more dots. You can see that they're all talking about the same thing, and that in all the same things, there's principles. Now, let's talk about be fruitful. And multiply. Now we have to look at God's creation to truly understand this. What does He mean when He says, I want you to be fruitful and multiply? This blew my mind when Myron Golden talked about this. Nature is reproductive in itself. It has enough abundance to provide. It is not scarce, which is what the human ego has started to chase, started to pursue, be like, I need. Let's think about a single apple. If I eat an apple, I'm out in nature. I'm out camping with my friends. I got an apple. It's delicious. And that apple, when it comes to the end of its life, thank you for nourishing me, but it only has 5 seeds. And I throw the apple into nature. Those 5 seeds are not going to come back as 5 apples. They're going to come back as 5 apple trees. Be fruitful and multiply. Now let's look at what it says in the Bible. Man was created in the image of God, which means that God planted a seed within us that we need to bring to this world. You've all felt the calling. You'd be lying to me if you said you hadn't. If you were an entrepreneur, you've sure as hell felt the calling. But you may have been just caught up in the material world. You may have been just caught up in the plane of effect. Because the plane of effect is the world of illusion, right? You ever seen that prism where the white light goes through it and turns to the rainbow? The white light is the quantum field, the infinite potential, God, and the material world is the rainbow. But it's the same thing. What you align with gives you clarity. Because if you align with the material world, you're going to align with the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, all the chaos, all the nonsense, which is actually what we need to step back, step away from, which is why meditation is so important, right? Our attachment to the rainbow, our attachment to the physical things that we're chasing and latching onto, is impulsive. If we can step out of that, take a deep breath, and realize that we're here to give and we're here to serve, that's where all the money comes from. And it's all energetics. Why do you think I'm talking about this and not some, oh, just post on YouTube and book more calls and maybe you'll close a deal if you pitch an offer properly? No, because that's not the thing that creates everlasting wealth and everlasting abundance. You'll be rich in ways you can't even experience. The Joe Dispenza video I just made warmed my heart in so many ways. Because I felt like the richest man alive to see people saying, you solved my problem. He didn't have to pay me for that. I just wanted to do it because I knew it was the right thing. I knew giving you guys this information is the right thing. And I know that when it's time for me to open up my doors of service some more and tell you, if you want me to help you break through the limiting beliefs and start to channel your highest self and live in ultimate alignment with your calling, which bridges passion, purpose, and profit, the people that have heard my message and have heard my calling and see the value I can provide are going to come. They're going to come line up. And I'm going to say, this is what it costs to work with me because my time is finite here. And this is what I see it being worth. And if that's something you align with, let's go work together because I'm all about collaboration. I'm all about a win-win. And if people don't align with that, that's fine. That's abundance. I have no need. Just the act of service. Now we're going to be breaking down this series some more because I'm going to start bridging this gap for you. I'm going to start showing you how the metaphysical, spiritual, and religious principles are actually about awakening your greatness, awakening your calling, awakening your infinite potential to serve the world, to step into your highest self, to impact people's lives and to be fruitful and multiply, to take what has God planted within you and bring it to the world and spread and multiply. So if you like this video, drop a like, drop a subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.